So now we will hear the perspective of many stars. And in her native tongue, her name meant one who communes with the ancestors. Many stars squawked out words of protest from a mouth and throat which rarely spoke. She and her granddaughter understood each other perfectly without the need for words. Thus they rarely talked out loud. Immediately upon the arrival of the guard, many stars discerned from his heart that the so-called sacred ceremony, which was supposed to honor her granddaughter, would actually bring danger to Kimayo. Both Laughing Wolf and Steady Turtle were away on a hunting trip that day. No one had bothered their private dwelling before, so why would this guard want to take Kimayo away now? Kimayo vaguely saw the picture of something long and tall in the guard's mind as she struggled to release herself and run to the safety of her grandmother's arms. But the guard held fast and jerked her away from the doorway and out down the path back to the village. Kimayo suddenly understood what she was seeing in the guard's mind: the feathers. She projected these thoughts back to her grandmother. "Grandmother, go see if the feathers are still in their hiding place." Her grandmother choked in horror and quickly ran down the path to where the sacred feathers were hidden. Seeing that they were gone, she decided to follow the guard and her granddaughter. All the way there, she put out a distress call mentally to Wolf and Turtle. "Great Spirit, please alert anyone who can help us." Many stars followed the guard to a tent-like dwelling. As she peeked through the slit on the jungle side of the tent, she saw a beautiful woman with long, dark, black hair, stirring some kind of liquid, and then force her granddaughter to drink it. It was all Many Stars could do to keep from screaming out, but the strong guard was also there, and she had no one to help her rescue her granddaughter. Many Stars made sure that no one saw her as various people walked in and out of the tent, bathing, dressing, and preparing Kimayo for some sort of ceremony. Tears filled her eyes as she watched her granddaughter's head droop. Obviously, she had been given something so that she would not protest or run away. When the final time came to take Kimayo to the tall mound of rock and dirt, Many Stars searched the crowd to see if she knew anyone who could help her. But the people's eyes were glazed over, and even when Many Stars recognized people, they did not recognize her in return, but kept mumbling something about a sacrifice to restore the health of the people. As Kimayo was led up the steep steps, she almost fell backwards. Many Stars pressed forward to help her granddaughter's rescue, but that guard at the base of the mound stopped her. "This cannot be happening," Many Stars cried within herself. "This terrible day could not be the destiny of our people. Great ancestors, please help me." What's happening with Sunwalker on that very day? Sunwalker moved with the wave of people that were gathering around the great mound. He had traveled here with 3 companions who were like a brother to him. They joined him to find out what this new ceremony was all about. Sunwalker had been feeling anxious for the past 3 days. It has something to do with the ceremony, he kept thinking. Why do the people think they need something new, rather than following the proven ways of the sacred one? Upon his arrival at the village, the people graciously provided him and his companions with food and drink. The food tasted good, prepared in the old way, but he hesitated about their drink, since he noticed a strange behavior in those who consumed it. The ones who drank the fragrant liquid did not seem to know their own thoughts. He chose instead to drink the water he had brought, and motioned for his friends to do the same. Now that the crowd of people had pulled him to the base of the great mound, he could see the back of a young girl with flowers in her hair being led up the steep steps. When she nearly tripped twice, his natural instinct was to go to her aid. Although the crowd was tightly woven together, Sunwalker decided to work his way closer. Mother, he thought in his mind, as memories came forth of the many times she had told him stories about the ancestors before he would go to sleep. What would the ancestors say about such a ceremony? His mother's thoughts came into his mind. They would send lightning sounds from the stars. Startled by the response, Sunwalker searched the sea of faces. Could it be that his mother was alive and here? Sunwalker, his mother exclaimed when she finally realized that she was not making up this conversation in her mind. The crowd crying, "Oh!" brought both of their attentions back to the young one being led up the steps. She had fallen backwards, caught again by the guards, but her face dangled backward and all could see who she was. "Kimayo!" shrieked Sunwalker, and simultaneously his mother let out a high-pitched shrill that the ancestors of Sacred One used to use to silence, balance, and heal the people. An ancient memory ignited within the people in the crowd, because they all turned toward the one making the sound, bowed their heads, and remained still as the tones moved through them like a tuning fork. They remembered that when Sacred One made those tones, all good things would come to the people if they bowed their heads and attuned in reverence. Therefore, while focusing on the tones, they were unaware of Sunwalker racing up the mound to rescue his daughter, Kimayo. However, Feathered Trumpet was fully aware of what was happening. Followed by Raven, he raced down the steps to reach the young girl before the stranger did. Raven did not care about the girl nor the stranger. She decided to use the confusion of the moment to take possession of the feathers. She had carefully prepared herself with potions and spells of protection so that touching the feathers would not harm her this time. Sunwalker arrived at his daughter only seconds before Feathered Trumpet. The guards, who had their heads bowed and were toning to the sacred sounds, suddenly snapped out of that state and struggled with a stranger who was trying to take the young girl. After lying Kimayo down gently, Sunwalker used the feet kicks that Sacred One had taught him to knock the guards unconscious. "The feathers," he faintly heard in his head in the voice of his daughter. And as Feathered Trumpet lunged toward him with a knife, Sunwalker instantly recognized the sacred feathers in his other hand. He knew that his daughter was telling him to rescue the feathers as well. With a skillful kick, he sent the feathers arching into the air, out of Feathered Trumpet's hand. As Raven reached for them, she suddenly recognized Sunwalker, and her moment of hesitation allowed him to kick the feathers upward again, while he knocked Feathered Trumpet and Raven into each other and into unconsciousness. Then, catching the feathers and placing them in his daughter's hands, he swiftly moved down the great mound. Many stars, thanked the ancestors as she continued the toning which kept the people bowed in reverence. She could sense that someone had moved in behind her, but stayed focused in toning the sounds. Sunwalker's friends joined him as he raced into the jungle. The feathers in his daughter's hand seemed to point the direction they should take. Knowing the power in those feathers, he followed whichever way they pointed, and his companions to guide the path they took. However, one who is most skilled in trail finding managed to read the signs clearly. Laughing Wolf, the guardian of the family, had returned to the dwelling when feeling Many Stars' distress call. Her footprints led him to the great mound where a crowd had gathered, and a young one was being led up the steps. By her gait, Wolf immediately knew that it was Kimayo, and that her grandmother must be nearby. When the ancient sounds came forth, the crowd faced toward Many Stars, and it was easy for Wolf to get close to her. He watched Sunwalker rescue his daughter and knew that he must do the same for grandmother Many Stars. So the moment the sacred sounds ended, Wolf shouted to the people, "Look, Feathered Trumpet has been hurt, and the one who took the maiden away went that way," pointing in the opposite direction that Sunwalker took. In all the confusion, when the people were trying to help Feathered Trumpet, Wolf carefully led Many Stars away to safety. Wolf listened quietly as Many Stars told him what he must tell Sunwalker when he found him. When they arrived at Many Stars' dwelling, they found that Steady Turtle had returned at his usual slower pace. After quickly gathering supplies for traveling, they all started out after Sunwalker. Wolf raced ahead to give Sunwalker the urgent message from his mother, while Steady Turtle, equally skilled in trail finding, followed at a pace that was easier for grandmother Many Stars. Sunwalker had reached a ravine. He and his friends needed to stop and catch their breath. As the companions stood guard, Sunwalker placed his daughter on some soft grass. She struggled to form the thoughts that she needed to tell him. "My father," Kimayo said in her thoughts, "my heart soars to see you again, but we have little time left together. They gave me a liquid that would not only numb me from being able to run away, but would also eventually kill me. Take these feathers, my father, and use them for the inward journey to the Ancient Ones. Then you must lead our people back to the sacred ways." Her thoughts drifted off into Cloud Dancer's mist, so no more words came. Sunwalker was startled. Was he going to lose his only daughter after just finding her? Are the feathers bringing her death, since they were told that no one should hold them, except for Sacred One or their rightful heir? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a scuffle behind him. One of Sunwalker's friends was holding Wolf's arms behind him in a deadly grip and said, "He says that you know him." It only took seconds for Sunwalker to recognize the face of the guardian that Sacred One had provided for his family. "Yes," Sunwalker acknowledged. "Let him go. He is a friend." And immediately he embraced Laughing Wolf. "I bring you an urgent message from your mother, Many Stars," began Wolf. Then, looking around, he added, "Only you should hear these words." So Sunwalker walked a ways away with Wolf and motioned for the others to keep an eye on his daughter. "Your mother said that I must tell you these things as close to her words as I can, so I will do my best." She began this way. "My son, It is with great peace and also sorrow that I tell you these things. On the night the sacred mountain exploded in our homeland, I was awakened by sparkling water leaving our dwelling. You had gone on the journey that Sacred One had requested, so why would sparkling water leave in the middle of the night with an arrow in her hand? She is not one to even touch such a thing. I felt compelled to follow her, after making sure that Kimayo was sound asleep. I followed sparkling water into the sacred cave. There she was confronting Sacred One. She wanted to know what had happened the night that she had spent with him just before he insisted that she marry you, Sunwalker. Shortly after that, we all went to the island of the heated mountain. Ever since that evening, Sparkling Water wondered if Kimayo was really your child, Sunwalker, but was afraid to tell anyone. Sunwalker's face showed horror at what he was hearing. Wait, Wolf urged. Many stars said that you would react this way, but wanted you to listen to the rest before you came to any conclusions. Sunwalker decided to let Wolf continue. Your mother said, while Sparkling Water was talking, it brought back a memory when I, Many Stars, had been invited to the cave where Sacred One lived. I was just a young girl. After eating a magnificent meal with Sacred One, I felt drowsy and must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew it was morning and I was all alone in the cave. I went to the river to bathe and then went home. Soon after this, Sacred One urged me to wed your father, which was fine with me because we deeply loved each other, but it startled my family since I was so young. Sparkling Water's conversation made me begin to remember how I had had a child very soon after being wed to your father. So I decided to wait outside the cave and speak with her privately. That was when the earth first began to rumble. Since stones and dirt were dropping on my head, I raced outside, fearful for Sacred One and Sparkling Water who were still inside the cave. Again the earth shook, and I could hear Sparkling Water scream as she ran toward the entrance. The moment she saw me, she barely got the word out, Kimayo, while extending her hand forth with the sacred feathers. With the third tremor, the rocks from the cave entrance piled upon Sparkling Water, and her last thoughts to me were, Sacred One is dead. He threw these feathers toward me just as the cave ceiling crashed down upon him. His thought said that Kimayo and Sunwalker were the rightful heirs. So I raced out of the cave as fast as I could. Her final words were, make sure that Kimayo gets these feathers. And she died. I felt that my questions had been answered. Both Kimayo and Sunwalker were seated by Sacred One to pass on the lineage of the ancient ones who came from the sun. Enough, Sunwalker commanded. I do not want to hear any more, and he stormed away, kicking the dirt and gravel underneath his feet. But one kick was so strong that it sent him falling down into the ravine, where his head hit on a rock. Cloud dancers swirled around him in vision mists. Is this the only way that we can get your attention? Came the voice of Sacred One. Do you always need to be hit on the head in order for your heart to listen? Sunwalker did not want to hear the sound of Sacred One's voice. He tried to whirl it away with his hands. How can I ever believe anything you taught me After learning how you tricked my wife and my mother that way, you must be the trickster rather than the sacred one. Why was I not told that Kimayo is my sister, not my daughter? His mother's face and voice came forward through the mist. I have prayed to Maker of all things for help, Sunwalker, so if you can hear me now, know that it is from the place where all souls meet, and listen carefully. You can heal Kimayo if you allow your heart to return to love, and there is very little time left. So allow yourself to feel the love of how Maker of all things knows no favorites. The Maker loves daughters and sisters, fathers and mothers, sons and grandchildren, all the same. Whether Kimayo is your daughter or your sister, do you not still love her? Many Stars continued. Sacred One thought carefully before choosing who should carry on his work and the sacred ways. He chose 2 women with pure hearts who would use the power not for their own advantage, but would consider the highest good of all involved. After releasing my own anger, I realized that sparkling water and I had that quality, and that we would instill the same ideals in our children. You and Kimayo are to walk hand in hand as equals, as brother and sister, to help the people remember the sacred ways. Since you are older, when you pass from the earth to the land of light, Kimayo can continue with the next generation. Thank the Sacred One for his wise choice. I am honored to be your mother, Sunwalker. If I am unable to catch up with you, then know that my prayers and the help of the ancestors will be with you. Go and heal Kimayo with the love of the Maker of all things, and then quickly continue on your journey. Laughing Wolf was rubbing Sunwalker's head as his eyes opened. No need to continue, Wolf, Sunwalker sighed. I got the rest of the message directly from my mother. Now I must go and give my energy to Kimayo. All joined in a circle around Sunwalker as he held Kimayo. The group extended their hands inward to lend their own energy. Sunwalker asked Maker of all things to help him. Show me what to do, he humbly asked. And he heard within, just be love. You need do nothing, just be the presence of love with no wants and no fears. Sunwalker surrendered to the inner message and felt the glow of love radiate out from him. Embracing Kimayo, the circle of friends, then extend out into the jungle they were in, the world, and even the universe. He could feel Kimayo's heartbeat get stronger. He thanked Maker of all things and basked in the glow of love for what seemed like a long time, until Kimayo's words brought his awareness back to the jungle. Thank you, Sunwalker, Kimayo whispered. Your radiant love has removed the toxins from my body. I feel my natural energy returning, and I have heard all about us while on the inner realm. Know that I love and honor you as my brother, the same as I loved and honored you as my father. Let us go hand in hand to this new land, and may we carry on the wisdom and ways of the sacred feathers. She handed the feathers to Sunwalker, and he hugged her and wept. Kimayo continued whispering in Sunwalker's ear. While you were sending me the energy of love, Sacred One showed me his life and why he made the decisions he did. It is not for me to tell you that story. I think Sacred One should tell you his reasons himself. After we have traveled a safe distance, I hope you can find it in your heart to go within and listen to Sacred One. He will take you through the journey as though you were with him, making the decisions of what to do for the people. Once you see the obstacles in his way, maybe you will understand. He truly regrets what he did, and he was trying to work out how he would tell the people on the day of my becoming a woman ceremony, when messages from the sacred mountain tried to come forth. However, since he was not centered, due to worrying about what to tell the people and how they might reject him, he could not become clear enough to understand what the spirit of the mountain was trying to tell him. Thus he called for you, Sunwalker, to receive the urgent message. Sacred One knew that where the mountain gets hot is where one hears the mountain spirit the clearest. He also knew that your heart was clear and open, so you could bring the information to the people. That is why he sent you away on the evening the mountain exploded. Sacred One became even more clouded within and out of balance when sparkling water came to him and demanded to know if I, Kimayo, were really his child. He was just beginning to explain to her why certain things were done by him and his ancestors when rocks from the cave ceiling came tumbling down. He threw the feathers to sparkling water and told her that you and I were the rightful heirs to continue the work. But both Sacred One and sparkling water were buried under rocks from the earthquake. So you see, if his thoughts had not been clouded with human emotion and the fear of rejection for what he and his ancestors had done, he would have seen what was going to happen and would have warned the people so that all could have gotten off the island in time. This is the dilemma between the human and the divine. When we are free of human emotion, we see clearly. But when our human mind is filled with self-doubt or fear, we do not grasp what we need to know or see what we need to see. What do you mean, what he and his ancestors had done? Asked Sunwalker. That is something Sacred One needs to tell you, Kimayo continued. Enough for now. I sense that someone is looking for our trail. It is someone who wants the power of these sacred feathers. We must move on quickly, and Wolf will hide our trail. Sunwalker also felt the urgency of moving on to a safer place, and thus gathered the group together for instructions. Kimayo wanted to force herself to walk in order to bring oxygen and life back into her brain and muscles. One of Sunwalker's companions scouted the area ahead of them while Wolf took up the rear and skillfully covered their tracks. As he walked, Sunwalker allowed Kimayo's wisdom to penetrate his angry heart. Perhaps he did not know the whole story. Yes, he decided, when they had a day's journey behind them, he would take the time to commune with Sacred One on the inner realm and seek to understand what had happened from a broader perspective. And in his native tongue, the name Sacred One meant one who works to balance the human and the divine. The sun was about to set when Sunwalker's group came upon a magnificent waterfall. They stood in its midst and splashed each other in the pools below the falls. In his heart, Sunwalker knew that this was the perfect place to seek Sacred One on an inner journey. After bathing with others, he climbed the rocks near the waterfall and found a quiet alcove facing the east. After settling himself and relaxing his mind and weary muscles, he breathed in deeply, and with the outward breath made the sound of wind going through an ancient canyon. He did this 3 times, each time placing his awareness in the center of the wind. He then allowed a beam of light from his heart to become a spoke of a giant wheel of light. As he traveled through the beam of light to the hub of the wheel, his energy molecules became lighter and lighter until he was in the center of the hub, the place where all souls meet and are one. Sacred One, he barely whispered in his thoughts, since this is a realm where thoughts are not as focused as in the human realm. I am here with you, replied Sacred One. I know your request, and I will show you my life choices based on what those before me had done. Allow yourself to merge with me and see through my eyes. Some walker found himself stepping into Sacred One's light form and then traveling back in time with him. As you see, Sacred One continued, when I was a boy, I was trained by my elders. They showed me how human beings had evolved on this planet. Those in the realm of non-form wanted to increase the awareness of those in form. They started by giving humans ideas of how to better their lives and rules by which to live in peace and harmony with all around them. When inspiration or new ideas came into a human's mind, the human saw it as something separate because it was different from how things were done before. There always seemed to be a tug of war between those who wanted change and those who wanted to keep things the way they had been. The tug of war was often between those who had power and those who wanted to bring equality. To convince the ones who wanted things to remain the same, the newer thinkers had to create or show increased benefit for changing things. Unfortunately, they found that the best way to do this was to show how a human being's sensations would be satisfied to a greater degree. The sensation of safety, enjoyment, food, sex, power, greater knowing, greater skills. The indulgence in physical sensation eventually made many humans addicted to sensation. Once their brain had recorded a new sensation and liked it, they wanted it again and again, and then better and better, or greater and greater. Focusing on sensation is what led many humans away from we-ness, or what is best for the whole, and toward me-ness, or what is best for me. So when one did not get what one wanted, one began to blame you, or something outside oneself, for all that was wrong in their life. Before that time, groups of humans had learned to think in terms of we rather than me. They truly enjoyed what was best for the greater whole, rather than just focusing on their own personal satisfaction. The most ancient ones actually focused on looking through the Creator's way of seeing life. Thus, they saw how everything is connected and could communicate with all aspects of life, since they communicated with the creative spirit, which is in all aspects of life. Sacred One continued, to help humans return to the ancient sacred ways, the non-form beings needed to send inspired leaders, now and then, to bring humans back to center, back to thinking of how one's actions affect the whole. The inspired or spiritual leaders had to make rules and then had to try to follow those rules the best they could. For example, spiritual leaders were trying to undo the human lust for taking sexual pleasure whenever one wanted to, even if it hurt another human being. One spiritual leader shared how a sacred one could rise above the desire for human sex. And soon humans challenged their spiritual leaders to prove it themselves and to not have sex themselves. Schools were formed to try to train people to return their consciousness to spiritual ways, and the sacred ones or teachers were expected to be free of human desires. But the dilemma which occurred was that those with a more enlightened awareness could not mate, and thus enlightened children were not being born. Those who had the most offspring seemed to be those who were the most aggressive and who refused to follow or listen to spiritual ways. Thus, more and more aggressive humans were being reproduced, and less spiritually enlightened beings were coming forth. Whatever the children saw their parents do, they did also. So aggressive parents were creating aggressive children. One sacred brotherhood decided to try to correct the situation by secretly seeding women who had proven to be spiritually advanced. By doing so, enlightened beings would not completely die out from the population. With less and less spiritual teachers available, there were very few left to pass on the teachings and keep the balance. As you see, Sacred One said, when I was older, I questioned my elders and asked why they could not just let go of the rule that spiritual teachers had to live without sex. Why did they not allow spiritual leaders to be examples of responsible sexual behavior? The elder replied that to change a rule would mean that the rule was wrong in the first place. At least that's the way he saw it. Thus, people would begin to question every rule that had been made. Then the people might also begin to question the teachers of the spiritual leaders and their schools, and even get rid of them. The community gave them donations so they did not have to work, but spent all their time in spiritual prayer, studies, or teaching others. So you see, pride and the fear of loss perpetuated the lie. I also had become accustomed to that lifestyle of the brotherhood and did not want to give it up, nor did I want to destroy it for the brotherhood. I could see the good we were doing in keeping the balance and creating a sanctuary for advanced beings, peaceful ones. But I never liked the lie of deception that I knew about and would one day have to participate in. For a week before Kimayo's becoming a woman's ceremony, I struggled within my conscience. When it came time for the father to step forward in the ceremony, I knew I should be the one, not you, Sunwalker. I had come to honor you in sparkling water and many stars, and did not want to perpetuate the lie that had been hidden for centuries by the sacred order to which I belonged. My mind kept wrestling with the possibility that everyone would abandon all the teachings I had been doing, which I knew would help humanity return to goodness, kindness, and balance. How would people forgive me for the secret way women had been seeded? That is why I could not become centered enough to understand what the spirit of the mountain was trying to tell me. My mind was filled with so much emotion and fear of rejection that I could not see or hear anything else. I could not even see that by staying in the cave I would not only cause my death, but that of sparkling water as well. What would you have done, Sunwalker? Sunwalker could feel all the inner turmoil, all the guilt, and yet wisdom that Sacred One had been sharing with the people. He had watched how many had turned their lives around and their hearts around to goodness and balance because of Sacred One's teachings. He also saw how Sacred One had disobeyed the Brotherhood's vow of keeping the mysteries to themselves. Sacred One was teaching the people who had followed him to the island all the ancient teachings which only the sacred brotherhoods were allowed to know before. Sunwalker could also see how telling the truth about how women had been seated for centuries might have destroyed the sacred order, the schools, and even the teachings, since the people would feel betrayed and thus begin to doubt all they had been taught. Perhaps even aggressive ones would have taken over the world and wiped out the gentle ones. What a choice, Sunwalker realized. What would he do now, he finally realized. Now is the only moment there is. What happened is in the past. What decisions would he make for the future? So Sunwalker began. I guess I can only tell you what I feel that I need to do now. I will continue to listen to the sacred feathers and the ancient ones for the teaching of how we can return to the natural balance and harmony with all of life. I will no longer use the term Sacred One, nor have a brotherhood where only a few learn the sacred ways. Instead, I will be an example of responsible action. I will show people how their every thought, word, and action creates a reaction. And thus, they need to be responsible for how they affect others and the world around them. I will tell them, continued Sunwalker, that an immature being thinks only of me, whereas mature beings think and see in the terms of we. Only immature beings blame something or someone outside themselves, whereas mature beings look to see how they themselves might be part of the responsibility for what is happening. Well done, Sunwalker, responded Sacred One. You are indeed a good leader, and Kimayo will assist you in all that you have to give. If you have learned all this from my life, then I have done the job I came here to do. You have also uncovered the meaning of Kimayo's name, the key to how humanity strayed away from the Creator was when humanity developed the concept of my and you. In other words, instead of seeing in terms of how we can serve each other by allowing the goodness of the Creator to work through us, humans invented possessiveness and began referring to things as my home, my mate, my talents, and so forth. They also invented the scapegoat of you, or you made me weak, unhappy, and so forth. The name Kimayu is the key to how to bring the people back to harmony and balance with all of life, concluded Sacred One. The key is to notice when you are looking through the perspective of my, as in my possessions, or you, as in you are the problem. Now Sunwalker understood why Sacred One had urged him to call his daughter Kimayu. Sunwalker knew that the peace he now felt towards Sacred One was because he had gained the lessons Sacred One had come to teach him. I will share the mysteries of the sacred school with all the people, Sunwalker said to Sacred One, as he watched his friend and father merge into the golden light. The people will act more wisely if they learn how to quiet the mind and go within, as you taught us. Thank you for teaching us how to do this, Father. As Sacred One merged with the light, Sunwalker saw a vision of his friends that he had made on the beach. Hummingbird, he sighed as he opened his eyes and felt the mist of the waterfall against his skin. I have not forgotten you, my soul's delight. I will send Hawk to bring you and our friends on this journey east to our new homeland. After stretching his legs, Sunwalker climbed down the rocks and joined the group for a feast that Laughing Wolf was preparing from his hunt. After the meal, Sunwalker asked Hawk to return to their community of friends on the beach and lead them here to join this group. Hawk was glad to return to get his wife or mate, Moonbeam, and their other friends. He packed some supplies and began his journey. He was careful, of course, to take a different route in hopes of confusing anyone tracking them. As the story continues, it shows how understanding another person's perspective can help heal relationships.